Our reading this morning is from Genesis chapter 18, a son promised to Abraham and Sarah. And the Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre as he sat at the door of his tent in the heat of the day. He lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, 3 men stood in front of him. When he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the earth and said, "My Lord, if I have found favour in your sight, do not pass by your servant. Let a little water be brought and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree, while I fetch a morsel of bread that you may refresh yourselves, and after that you may pass on, since you have come to your servant." So they said, "Do as you have said." And Abraham hastened into the tent to Sarah and said, "Make ready quickly 3 measures of fine meal, knead it and make cakes." And Abraham ran to the herd and took a calf, tender and good, and gave it to the servant, who hastened to prepare it. Then he took curds and milk and the calf which he had prepared and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree while they ate. They said to him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" And he said, "She is in the tent." The Lord said, "I will surely return to you in the spring, and Sarah, your wife, shall have a son." And Sarah was listening at the tent door behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, advanced in age. It had ceased to be with Sarah after the manner of women. So Sarah laughed to herself, saying, "After I have grown old and my husband is old, shall I have pleasure?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the appointed time I will return to you in the spring, and Sarah shall have a son." But Sarah denied, saying, "I did not laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did laugh." In this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Why did Sarah laugh? I didn't laugh. Yes, you did. No, I didn't. Yes, you did laugh. This playful interchange covers over an awkward moment. Something odd had occurred, and no one quite knew what the correct response was. So Sarah laughed. What was odd was that God had announced some good news to Abraham. Your wife Sarah will have a son. Now, this news is odd for at least 2 reasons. Firstly, who is bringing the news? In the reading, we're told at one point it's 1 person, and then at another point it's 3 people. Who actually is bringing the news? And then, even more oddly, Sarah and Abraham are both very old, and they don't have any children. How on earth is Sarah going to bear a child? This is odd, to put it mildly. This banner over here is the Angophora tree. We know from our friend Dennis Foley, an Indigenous person, that if you sit under an Angophora tree, you will become pregnant and bear a child. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I have gained Rosemary's permission to tell this story. Rosemary is in Darwin at the moment with her family. Rosemary has an Angofera tree at her place, and I often caution her about what will happen if she sits at the bottom of the Angofera tree. I am waiting for her new child. And whenever we talk about this, we laugh a lot. Do I expect her to physically bear a child? No, I don't. Do I expect that new life is coming in a surprising way? Yes, I do. Look at our congregation. What do you think's our average age? 70. Do you know of any 70-year-olds who bear children? Will this congregation bear children? Yes. Nicola, that's a little bit sneaky. They will. I have a deepening hope we will. We will bear new life. And if you want to laugh, please do. And laugh heartily. And then embrace it. Let's think about this odd announcement. Firstly, in terms of good news. Secondly, in terms of the challenge of receiving it. Good news. God intends good news for everyone. That is God's purpose in relating to the world, to bring good news and to bring us to the sense that when we look at life, we are constrained to see it through the prism of hope. Yes, there is messiness in life. There is tragedy and suffering and pain. Yes, there is. And there is hope. If when you hear that you laugh, then as I said before, please do. Give it a hearty guffaw. Laugh till your sides hurt. And then believe it. Good news. At the recent Logie Awards, Noni Hazelhurst noted with regret the prevalence of bad news. It circulates around us all the time. She noted the rising incidence of depression and of suicidal thoughts. And she called for a change of focus, particularly for the creation of a TV channel that would share stories of good news. And she offered to host it. Her speech at the Logies is a contemporary word from God. It's akin to the announcement to Sarah, you will have a baby. There will be good news shared in our community. Let us note, good news that is from God is not a fantasy. It's not pie in the sky. It's not about what happens in heaven when people die. It's about earth. It's about here It's not Pollyanna. It doesn't float above the messy realities of life. It's embedded in them, and it addresses them. Good news. It's here. And good news that comes from God is often small. One child was promised to one elderly couple. In the context of the larger narrative thread of Genesis, this child was actually the bearer of the hopes of a whole nation. And all of that hung on the thread of one small child. Small things, when embraced, can have very positive and large consequences. God intends good news for everyone. It's real, it's earthy, it's small, and it has huge potential. Secondly, the challenge of receiving good news. Good news from God is always concerned with new life. Good news from God brings something new into being, and that is challenging. The challenge is twofold. Firstly, most are comfortable with what is not new. Most prefer what is well known, what has survived the test of time, and has become, in the best sense, a living tradition. That is clear. That is well defined. That is not difficult to grasp. It fits into our world readily. What is new does not fit into our world readily. You may have seen in my blog last week that when we hear or see something that is new, the data goes to the right side of our brain. The right side of our brain has few links with the language centre, which is on the left side of our brain. Therefore, it's very difficult to find words to describe what is new. The data then goes across from your right brain to your left brain, where it is analysed, defined, and given a name. Then it becomes sensible. But we miss the first encounter in the right brain because it is utter newness. It is actually unspeakable. And that is where God is, in what can't be said. We're not so keen on that. Let me be clear. I'm not saying that everything that is new is good or of God. I am saying that without a deepening awareness of what is new, we will miss God. One scholar has noted, faith in God is not a reasonable act that fits neatly into normal schemes of life and perception. Here's an example. Have you ever seen genuine fake watches? You bought one, David. More fool you. This is a wonderful street stall outside Ephesus. Genuine fake watches. That is not reasonable. And yet it may be the bearer of God and of good news. It's challenging to embrace good news because of the way we perceive life. It's challenging. Secondly, it is challenging because of who God is. God is infinite, impossible to contain. And we are brought face to face with this arresting truth in the question that was put to Sarah. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? I imagine myself as Sarah. I listened as the question was put to me. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? Is there nothing that God cannot do? I answered, well, there's quite a lot, actually, that God can't do. God can't intervene magically in human affairs. God can't change the weather. God can't stop car accidents. God can't put a much-needed halt to violence in the world. And there it was. I had figured out God. I had encapsulated God in my thoughts, and strangely, God resembled everything that I believe. But God is God, the infinite one, 3 in 1. God is not the rehearsed thoughts of my mind. God is infinitely larger. Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? When God brings good news, we hesitate. And when we do hesitate, let us recall that God is God and give thanks for that. That God has created us to be co-creators with her of the world, and therefore to be bearers of good news. And let us give thanks for that. So when God arrives on your doorstep with good news, laugh. Have a hearty laugh. Have a side-splitting laugh until you ache. And then embrace it. And like Sarah, we will give birth to children of hope. Amen.